right. So today I'm talking to Daniel, and we got to meet at the Estuary retreat up in Connecticut, the very exclusive, uh, limited uh, attendance conference, which was pretty fun because it was a small group and everybody got to know each other pretty well over the course of the weekend. Um, so it's great to have you on here. I guess the normal thing is to just start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe start with the home you grew up in and how you ended up hearing about estuary and all that.
Okay. Hi, Mick. Good to see you again. Um, I actually grew up in a great home. I was very fortunate to have really awesome parents. Um, it was a Christian household, um, and like genuinely, truly, like they loved me. Never doubted that. We weren't wealthy, but like we didn't care. Um, and Yeah, just super blessed. They loved me. We went to church. I've never kind of guess I've sort of been a Christian my whole life. I don't really remember ever a point where like I had some kind of big conversion, which is a little
Mhm.
bit weird maybe. Um,
Yeah.
but super fortunate for all that. Um, let's see, I guess I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is a cool town. Um, I was went to a small little Christian school. We actually I graduated with six other people in my class. So really
Nice.
tiny, which is an awesome school. I haven't told my story in a long time. After high school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I found, well, it's a large organization called YWAM. It's a Christian organization. If you haven't heard of it, there's like bases they call them all over the world. Basically, a guy named Lauren Cunningham had a vision. I haven't thought about this in 20 years of kids going out into the world all over the place. And so from that, he started building, and now there's bases all over the world. You go there, and they basically do you do a DTS to get into the school, and you do like 3 months of like basic Christianity kind of stuff, and then after that, you go on outreach to somewhere in the world and do basically a long mission trip for 2 months or so. Um, so after high school, when I didn't know what I wanted to do, I didn't couldn't really afford to just go to college, and I couldn't justify just paying, not knowing what I was doing. Which
Yeah.
maybe I should have done that, but I just couldn't
I
justify
don't
it.
know. I did the exact same thing you did. So
Oh, good, good.
I'm.
Yeah, it
It
just
wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't YWAM, but I went to this other. I went to a ministry training thing at like a big mega church that some of my friends had gone to and heard about it. And it was the same thing. It was like the only thing I kind of wanted to go to college for was art, and I was like, that doesn't pay any money, so I will not do that. So, you know,
yeah, clearly Jonathan Peugeot doesn't make any money.
I don't think it. I don't
Yeah,
think his
no,
degree helped him that much, honestly. In that, or I mean,
it's a great point.
it's
Yeah,
not a surefire path to adulthood, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, totally agree. Um, so anyway, because I didn't know what I want to do and I didn't want to spend a ton of money, um, I found this YWAM thing. I decided to go do that. I did that in Colorado in the foothills of the Rockies, which is beautiful. It's a great time to. It was kind of nice to be able to like sort through yourself and God, and it was a good place to kind of grow up and transition out of um, being in
yeah,
your parents' house.
right.
Um, so basically, came back from that, still didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I figured I'd just go back into YWAM. They have kind of, it's like quasi college. Like you technically get credits, but they're basically good nowhere.
Yep.
Um, uh, so I decided to do another school with them just to buy more time because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I did an SBS, which is basically 9 months long. I did it in England, but they have it in other places. And we basically studied the entire Bible, basically word for word, for 9 months. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. Um, it was I don't it's such going through the whole Bible, when you read the Bible like basically 5 times, study it word for word, and going through it at that level, like you lose a lot of the details. But
Yeah.
having that quick of an overview to see the whole thing like at a distance has been
Mm.
really good for kind of building a frame. Um, so basically, while I was at that school in England, I met my wife. We had a fun little story where like I didn't want to go to England because it's England and it's rainy all the time, and they had one in Australia, and that's where I wanted to go
Yeah.
to meet an Australian girl. And my wife was like bouncing around and finally decided on England. And we figured out later, right at that time, I decided to go to England. So we say that we did it to meet each other. Um, so we met there in England during that school. Basically dated. We were living in a I think it was like a 18th century like boys' school. It's a big like mansion thing
Mm.
in England. So we basically did that school studying the Bible together. We started dating after like 2 or 3 months. So we got like 6 months of basically being around each other all day, every day to get to know one another.
That's
Um,
cool.
it was
So,
awesome. And it's
yeah.
good.
So you were about what, like 20 or 21 or something then? Something like that.
Probably 2007, right? Yeah, somewhere around there, 20, 21, 22. Yeah.
Okay. And where was she, where is she from? She wasn't from England, right?
No, no, she's from Indianapolis, just like 45 minutes south of Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay. So not
So yeah.
not too much of a weird culture like clash between you guys then.
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
fortunately, no. And Pittsburgh and Indianapolis aren't that far, so that worked out kind of okay
Yeah.
too. It was kind of fortunate that way. Um, let's see, I came back from that, and we kind of did the long distance um, dating thing. At that point, we were pretty sure that we wanted to get married. Um, the joke is that YWAM is young women after men, so it
Yeah.
worked out.
Yeah.
Um, so came back doing long distance dating thing. I still had no plan. And one of the people that I graduated, one of the other 6 people in the class that I graduated from high school with, his father started a business doing in construction, doing caulking. He had been a window installer, got sick of that, and started his own company just doing caulking, since caulking is a part of installing windows, obviously. And he had bugged me before to work for him. I was like, nah, I don't want to do construction. Um, and got back and had a woman that I wanted to marry and no income. So
Yep.
all of a sudden, working in construction sounded great. So I gave him a call, asked him if he'd give me a shot, and started working from him. After 6 months or so, I ended up liking it quite a bit. Um, and then we got married.
Awesome. So that obviously, kind of that is something that's interesting to me, the whole like working with your hands kind of thing. And so you did find that you liked that after a while. So how has that experience been for you? Like, why would you say like, um, because obviously you didn't know what you would pursue in a college degree, but you found yourself in this path, and presumably now, like if you had known, like, hey, this is a good job and I would like it, you might have just gravitated towards that, or straight away or something. But what is the benefits of it for you, of the, I don't know, the blue collar lifestyle, I guess.
So I think, I mean, it suits me really well. I don't know why. I guess I had this like you should try to be more than a blue collar thing going on in my head, like you should
Yeah.
aspire to more or something. And I think that tainted it. But like I started working doing landscaping when I was 14 or so, and like I like it. I like working with my hands. I like accomplishing things during the day. I like being outside. I'm not great with technology, and I don't know that I could stand sitting inside all day. um, I guess it was a bizarre thing that I kind of didn't consider construction at all. um, Sorry, what was the
Oh, well, yeah.
question?
What I mean, what do you like about it? Like,
Oh, so it like, as it turns out, you can actually make enough money to like live, which is really nice, kind of
mhm,
important. um, you get to do things with your hands, which I love. And like it varies, as you know, in construction. But for me, like, um, so this week I was working on an Aldi, which was a week's worth of work, and then I'm on to the next job. I'll be going to Johns Hopkins next week, and that's gonna probably end up being like a 2 months job. But it changes enough that it's not boring, and it's a good amount of, like, for me, it's a good amount of working and engaging with people, like sorting things out with architects and superintendents and stuff. And so you have personal interaction, but also once I've kind of figured out the job, I'm in a boom lift by myself all day, so I can listen to audiobooks and stuff, which is great. I love the opportunity to learn. Um, and like, there's always new problems to solve, whether it's interpersonal problems or like, how am I going to get to this? How am I going to caulk this? Like, but I I like the problem solving as well, and I like the variance of it. It's not the same thing every day. I get bored fairly easily.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So then, you know, you have the time to listen to things, and um, now I'm seeing that you have quite a few books on the shelf there. I see the Wheel of Time, which is one that I like, and I see the Hobbit up there too. And I
I
wish
can't
more
believe you
people.
can see that.
Yeah. Well, I could just see that symbol, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Wheel of Time right there. So, because I wish people would give the Wheel of Time a little bit more of the like analysis treatment that Tolkien gets. Like, I like Tolkien. Obviously, we wouldn't have all the things that we have without him. But man, people have just poured over those books like endlessly. Like, and it's like there's other things that you could also like find uh, connections, in, and so that's good. So I mean, obviously, because that was the stuff that for a long time when I was um, working on, I would listen to, and it's fun because it's entertainment, but um, obviously, I know you kind of got into this estuary space because you started listening to Paul Vanderklay videos. So, and what was your path getting to that?
So so many things there. Um, okay, you might have to shepherd me along. So
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't want to not talk about the Wheel of Time. So
yeah.
my wife is actually the one. I had not really been into fantasy. My wife is the one that actually told me about that. It's a great series. I know that, like, I have personal friends that will be mad at me for saying this, but I don't like those Lord of the Rings books. They're Laura's. I do not like the books. I'm sorry. I know that makes me a terrible person, and I'm not
Oh,
even a
it's
Christian.
okay. My theory now is like, in reality, we have the movies. 90% of the people will watch the movies and will not read the books. So the movies are like the new, that is the like official Lord of the Rings for most people. Obviously, the more academic types, the nerds don't like that, but that's just the way it is. I mean,
Yeah,
so
yeah, absolutely. And I fully admit, like, the Lord of the Rings, way deeper. It's awesome. That, like, the whole world is ridiculously cool. But I really like the Wheel of Time. I really like. I think we mentioned this before. The Lightbringer. It's probably my favorite, like, somewhat trivial, like, entertainment thing.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
The
but
Brent Weeks.
I really like that one.
Yeah, I like it too. I only read it through the one time, so I want to do it again another time. But yeah,
Yeah,
it
we should
was.
talk about that sometime. It's
Yeah.
fun. So anyway, um, so in listening to stuff at work, I like, it's nice to have the, like, Wheel of Time, Brent Weeks kind of stuff for, like, there's days when it's like, now it's 10 degrees outside, it's freezing cold. Like, I'm not going to be listening to deep stuff. So it's nice to have the more trivial stuff to listen to. Um, but also I found out that, like, I when sorry, basically Trump came on the scene. I'm having to think through how this happened as we're
Hmm.
talking. Trump came on the scene, and, like, I didn't really care about politics or Trump, but the thing that I noticed was everyone that I knew, like, bifurcated into, like, Trump is the devil or Trump is Jesus, and, like, this is weird, and I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
He's definitely
Um,
neither of those.
right,
Yeah.
right. That was the only thing I was sure about.
Yeah.
um, so right about at that time, I bumped into Peterson, which kind of like I still love. He's the first place that I heard like order and chaos and like the function of the left and the right, and gave me like both sides have their point, and it's like a balancing between the two. And I loved that frame because it was honoring to both sides. And everything I had heard from everybody else was like, oh, the other side's evil and stupid and morons. So I really fell in love with Peterson for that frame alone to help frame politics. And then he was doing like I've always been kind of bored, like boring. My mom said I came out like a 60-year-old man, like I'm just boring. And like when you're boring and old but still a kid, the things that everyone's doing seem like dumb, but you tell them that and they get mad at you. But Peterson came on the scene and was saying those things in a way that people loved. And like that will forever endear me to him, that he like gave practical, like fatherly advice to people that desperate that was such a big deal. Um, and then like through him, I listened to him and started getting to things like crap, I can't remember anybody's name now. Other people. And eventually that led me after a long time, maybe a couple of years ago, maybe three, um, to bump into Peugeot and Vervaeke, and
Mhm.
they utterly blew my mind. I still really like both of them, and somehow, even though I love them, was listening to kind of all the periphery things around that space, I never bumped into Paul Vanderklay at all. Like I'm sure it popped up on my feed and I just didn't notice. Um, but for some reason, I don't know why. Maybe I don't know. Maybe a year ago, I'm terrible at time. I decided to give one a try and start to listen to him. And I've really liked his stuff. Um, but more than like it seems to me, and I'm still new here, so forgive me for, I know a lot of the people that are listening to this have been paying attention to Paul and this little corner and everything for a long time. But for me, like I like Peterson. I like, and I know it's unfashionable to say that, but I don't care. And I like
I like it.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Peugeot, Vervaeke, like I like them all, and I recently found them with DC Schindler, um, and I like their concepts. But the thing that got me about all was the estuary thing, which is what I'm trying to get to, and um, like he all of a sudden had, what do they call it? The videos that he does with totally escaping my mind.
The randos.
No. The with the they like sing songs and rap and stuff. It's completely
Who does? Who does this?
Paul does. Like every
Oh,
week he does it
oh,
with,
the
oh my
Freddie,
goodness.
the Freddie and Paul show.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And seeing that, it's like what, like I can't see any of the other people putting stuff like that on their channel,
Yeah.
but seeing that show me like this guy, like he's after like love and relationship in a way. It's not just like mental ideas, and that like show me Paul to me looks like he's good, not just great, and that was really attractive to me. And um, then I slowly noticed the thing called estuary, and I've been in small groups my whole life. It's one of my favorite things to do is to lead small groups, be in small groups. It's where almost all of the really good, deep life bonding conversations I've ever had have been a part of. So to see that happen, and I used to be, I used to lead a group in Pittsburgh at a Andy Stanley offsuit church. Um, uh, Starting Point was the name of the group, and it was kind of like estuary but it's further inside the church. And I love
Mhm.
that intermediary space where you get to ask like legitimate questions and there's no like shaming or anything like that. So it's really attracted to the estuary. I think it's a great idea. um, and then I saw that the retreat that we went to popped up, and I was just starting to kind of understand what was going on with estuary and Paul. I was like, you know what, I just like, let's go meet these people, see if they're for real, try to understand it, experience estuary, and see if it's kind of what I think it is and could be. um and the Freddie and Paul show kind of thing made it feel like it's a safe bet that these people aren't going to be, other than Mark Parker, like crazy murderer people.
He was fine. He was fine on.
He's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he is great. Um, yeah, so I loved it. I think I've lost the thread because I've been rambling for too long.
That's okay. No. So okay, so yeah, so now that you went to that retreat, so now what's the verdict? Everybody's real people, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
kind of what I thought. Like, so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's awesome, and it's made like I maybe I'm old fashioned. Like the digital thing is just weird for me. Like, but now that like I know who you are, um, Mark Parker, like I've met Paul, Jeff P. His show with doing C.S. Lewis every day is awesome. Like it makes it feel more real to engage and more like actually building relationships other than just consuming stuff. So I really
yeah,
like that. Um,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
awesome to get to meet all you. This is one of the best experiences of my entire life, honestly.
Yeah, I think like for me, I would say the thing that's pretty cool about it is, some of the people, Paul, I was watching his stuff every morning for like probably 3 years now, something like that. And there's that thing where when you listen to podcasts or people on videos, you sort of feel like, oh yeah, like I know them, like I'm their
Yeah,
friend. And then I guess the fear would always be that you meet them and then it's like they're a jerk and
yeah,
it's super awkward. But so far, I'd say pretty much that, my experience was that, oh no, like my perception of that person in the way that they were portraying themselves was very accurate once you get to meet them in person. And so there's not a lot of hypocrisy or anything like that. It's yeah,
yeah.
everybody's just being themselves, and I think what is that? It's a lot of rough edges, so it's not like it's people trying to present this super polished thing to the world, but yeah, it's pretty cool, and I think it does show like the value in some of this like digital stuff because it is um like because you wouldn't sign up for a retreat or something like that without having those first steps of familiarizing yourself with the content and the ideas and stuff like that. So that's cool. So all right, so you kind of had grew up in church and then you did the YWAM thing uh and then you got married, settled into work in life after that. And then and what was your church experience like over the course of that time? Was it pretty consistent or
It was reasonably consistent. We went to church growing up at a church in Pittsburgh. I had some times when I wouldn't go to church just because like bouncing around between places or like being in YWAM, whatever. Um, for it took us a little bit of time after we got married. So we moved my high school year, my parents moved to Rochester, New York, which is where I'm at now. And I went back to work in Pittsburgh. Laura's from Indianapolis, so we ended up obviously moving to Pittsburgh. And it took us a little bit of time. I didn't want to go to the church that I grew up at. I wanted to kind of have a fresh start with my wife and meet new people that were our people. So it took us a little bit of time to find a church. Eventually found a church called North Bridge, which is Andy Stanley's satellite church, and we really liked it. It's a great church. Maybe 300 people, fairly small. Um, we went there for probably about a decade. Um, really liked it. Pretty involved. I've never been great at sitting through a church service. I know that makes me a terrible person, but I've always enjoyed, like, I'd rather be serving, doing
yeah.
things like at church. Like I would spend, rather than going to the service, I would often spend time. There was this guy that would be like in the foyer of the church that was kind of awkward and couldn't go in. So I'd just hang out and talk with him. Um, we had a great experience at that church. Moving up here, it took us a little bit to find another church, and we're kind of like awkwardly trying to find one that feels um, that we want to invest in, both for reasons that we probably don't need to go into for this, but like personally tragic reasons. My wife and I, I don't actually know. I know what deconstruction is, but typically when people mean deconstruct, like they get cynical about everything and just destroy everything.
Mm,
But through a bunch of like life stuff, my wife and I have both kind of deconstructed, but more deconstructed, not the concept of God, but kind of all not
particular
mature.
the particular interpretations that you had latched onto, I guess you'd say. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's probably a similar thing to me, and I think that's kind of like I think that is the healthy way. You have to do that in some extent, because the way that you perceive things as a child, whatever, if it's taught to you from your parents or pastors or whatever, you just, it's all more complicated than you can imagine in some ways. But um, it doesn't mean it was a lie or whatever. But you know, and probably most of it is more about how we heard it, even than how they were saying it. That's what I tend to try to give people the benefit of the doubt when they say, like, my parents were horrible because they brought us to this church where they taught these awful things, and it's like, no, were they? Was it really that way, or was that just kind of how you
yeah,
remember it?
yeah,
But yeah, so I hear you, because that was the same kind of thing. It's I have one version of Christianity that I got from my parents, and then as soon as I started going to like a different church around high school, and it was like, oh, they believe some different things, like they see things different way, and then you have to wrestle with it a little bit. And so yeah, which to me I think is um you know I think it's a good thing for that reason that we have a lot of different types of churches, because
yeah,
they don't all serve people the same way, and they there's a lot of different types of people, so it's good to have some of that variety.
yeah.
So okay, so I like you're saying that you were pretty comfortable with the whole estuary kind of thing because you were very familiar with the kind of small group experiences a little further inside the church. Um, do you think that those what do you think is like how do I want to put this? Okay, do you think that the churches with those kind of things that they have, are they hitting the mark, or um, are they missing something by not including kind of the more estuary thing, or how do you see that mix going? Because I almost feel like church is really great if you're in a good church. It's really great for the people inside, but it can be kind of too hard to connect to those people outside. What do you think is what's your read on like the current state of affairs? I don't know. I guess you could say in like church world as you perceive it.
I I don't. This is I'm grappling with this right now, so I don't know that I have answers yet.
Mm,
Um, Probably won't ever. But I it's tough because it's very church dependent. Like I suspect if you're like at a really high church, like it looks different. Like I haven't really experienced that. I've been
mm,
more on the evangelical side of things. Um, I I can say for the churches that I've been going to, like there definitely feels like there's holes. And like I've been grappling with the fact that like our it doesn't feel like it sounds like we kind of go to kind of the same type of church, like Protestant.
yeah.
Um, it doesn't feel like it's almost like our trick is to adapt to the culture to some degree, and we haven't adapted, I think, to the fact that like we're all bombarded with information all the time. Like I don't forgive me, but I don't need another half-hour long message that I've heard a dozen times and I can find a better version of on the internet.
Hmm.
Not that that's a bad thing, but the thing that I like about Estuary is it gives people a chance to actually grapple with things, to offload some stuff, and to engage. Um, and like I don't know, even inside the church. I mean, it depends on the church, so it's really tough.
Yeah.
And it depends on the leader of the small group as to how real they're willing to be. But I
Hmm.
definitely think at least in the church that I've been to, I think the slightly more outside of church thing is sorely needed.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we could put it like this way, because I would say, obviously we have the thing where it's like, oh, there's a lot of people who wouldn't step foot in a church, or they wouldn't attend a church service, but they would say, okay, but I am willing to go to this estuary group. So that's one kind of person that is obviously needed, and it's good for them to have that. But I would say, from my experience, there's also a lot of people in church who would be like, there's a lot of things that I know I can't say in my regular Bible study or small group or whatever. And that's, I think, maybe even something I'm more interested in, like, oh, that's a reason why we need the estuary thing for those people. Because, as far as like an evangelistic tool or whatever, I guess, I mean, that's not the explicit purpose, I guess, but I see there is some value, but I almost see, like, I don't know, uh like my when I kind of saw the whole Peterson thing happening, I was like, oh man, the church needs to figure out what's going on here, or else it's just going to keep being the church, and the difference between the church and the rest of the world is just going to become more and more like extreme until they don't like speak the same language anymore, you know.
Yes. Yeah, I not that long ago, funny enough, wrote a email which my wife said was too spicy because I'm a construction worker, so I don't know how to talk nicely. But to the elders of my church, like, you don't know how to speak their language. Like, I understand your frustration with like Peterson because his theology isn't all lined up. Like, I get it. But there's a lot of truth there. And he's communicating in a way that people are grabbing onto. Like, even if it's not perfect, like, that's a big deal. And you're also not as perfect as you think you are. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I keep losing the thread of your questions.
That's all right. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's not really so specific. Okay, so like, what would you say then? Like, because what is the thing that Peterson? What did you get from Peterson that you weren't getting from church? Or and not to say like it wasn't there in church, but it made more sense when you heard it through Peterson, right?
So that's a good question. I wonder, I have this loathing for jargon, which is, I know, a childish and silly thing, but I think often Christians are super guilty of just saying jargony words that people outside the church have no idea. And if they think they understand, like, it's some bizarre version. And did I lose you?
Uh, I can hear you, but your face isn't moving.
Oh no. That's all right.
Okay, there, it's back. So,
Um, like, I don't know that we even, most of us, like, I'm not highly educated. I'm not that fluent in theology. Like, I think we misunderstand even talking amongst ourselves. And so I think some of the utility of Peterson was like to just put it in different language, like put it in, I know it's a secular
mhm.
language, but people can grab onto that. And I think that was super useful just to hear, even if it's the same concept, hear it from a different angle, hear it slightly differently is really, really helpful. And I don't think we're very good at that in the church.
Yeah. Well, I think yes, I agree with you, and I think like this is one thing where the construction business kind of I think helps me understand this thing and does a really good job, because obviously if you're talking to like engineers and architects, they probably do know all of the construction jargon, and they know all the things, and they can say all the right things when they're ordering, whatever, or they're telling you exactly what they need you to do. They can speak in that level. But then I guess sometimes you like residential stuff too, or not so much,
Not
or
much, mostly commercial.
okay. But you know that, like, if you are then talking to or, it doesn't even have to be necessarily residential, but if you're talking to somebody who's not the expert, but they are the person that knows, hey, there's a problem, they don't know, the right words to describe the problem or whatever. But then you need to be able to communicate with them, and you need to figure out like what they're describing. And so it's like the difference between knowing like this is the word that you say when somebody says this versus actually like understanding the thing that you're talking about. Because if you're understanding the thing that you're talking about, then it doesn't matter if the person, they don't need to know all the technical names of all the products and things. They just need to know that you understand their problem and you know the appropriate solution. So, yeah, I can get what you're saying there, and that sometimes you sit in church and it's like you're just hearing people talk about this language of like theology or just the kind of Christianese thing, and it's like, what does that even mean? And you can't even, and even if you ask, like, what does it mean, like, to be atoned of your sins, and then they'll just say a sentence of other things that doesn't connect to like anything else in your life that you can grasp in the same way. So yeah, so Peterson helped with that, though, in maybe putting some different names on the concepts. Like, did you feel like after you start listening to all that stuff, does that improve your experience in church as far as like, or maybe not necessarily a church, but like your relationship with God or your own understanding of scripture and things like that?
I think for me, Peterson wasn't as helpful with the Christian stuff. That was more like, I find Peugeot more interesting in that realm,
Mm-hmm.
even though I don't quite understand that deeply yet. And I think like just taking like all of them together, seeing Christianity, like a nice thing about construction is that like we engage with reality. I think this is probably unfair, but more than say an architect or a white collar person. And like I've had many times in construction where an architect who knows way more than me, way more educated than me, way more intelligent, understands the physics behind everything that I don't, wants me to do something that actually doesn't work, like at all. And any like the dumbest person in construction that's been there for a couple years will know like that reality doesn't work like that. Like I know it works nicely in your map, but
Mm-hmm.
here in the real world, that's not how it works. And it felt like my church was playing on a map that like didn't connect to reality, and the like Peterson sphere felt more like it was connected to reality, like actual like useful things that I could grapple with. And somehow in going through all that and coming out of like the way we talk about Christianity in a church like ours, like made it so much more real and made God so much bigger. And interacting with like hearing in this space, I haven't listened to him much, but Sam, is he the
Same,
Unitarian?
the Unitarian, yeah.
Yeah, like I I don't know. I don't know that much about Unitarianism, but a lot of what he says, like, okay, like it really seems like I wouldn't call him not a Christian. And the
No, no,
world is so
for
much
sure.
bigger than the tiny little like box that I was handed, which of course it is. Like it's bigger than I'll ever understand. But to engaging in the Peterson sphere made it more real. Seems like it fitted more to my reality that I was in everyday life. It was more useful. Um, and I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, Sam. Yeah, it's funny. It's like Sam, you know, because been in similar types of churches to the ones that we go to. Like, it's like, yeah, I could relate to a lot of what he says way more than some of these other guys. Like, theological differences aside or whatever, it's like, I mean, that is kind of the, what are we arguing about here? Like, we're arguing about terms? Like, we're arguing about like what we call a thing, but whatever you call a thing, it doesn't change the thing itself, you know. And maybe maybe one person's understanding of what that thing is incorrect and the other person's is more correct. But either way, it's like, yeah, you still have to have it like work and the gist of it. Um, yeah, I noticed that like with Peterson, it was almost like um, there wasn't like a lot of specific things that he ever said that like really was super important to me, but it was more like the vibe of it, in that just he was, especially like towards young men and stuff, being like, hey, you should have a good life, you should work hard, you should do these things, like, and those things are good things. Like it was almost like those things he was saying, those are good things in and of themselves. Whereas you could go into a church and it's like, if somebody was had their life way more together than I did, but like they didn't have Jesus in their heart or whatever, it's like, that don't listen to that person. They have nothing to offer you, like, or the only thing is that matters is like, is somebody have the right like spiritual status, or solving that issue is like more important than dealing with any other issues a person might have or whatever. And it just gets to a weird thing where you're just thinking about like, you just start thinking about life in these weird ways because it's like this abstraction, instead of, hey, you need to figure out a career path. I mean, because that was even the thing, like, which, I guess same with you, the way you fell into it. It was like nobody really ever articulated like why you should get a job and like do all the normal things in life. And because I was like, okay, well, church is the most important thing. Like I figured that out when I was a kid or whatever. Like the only career path that I saw that was like makes sense is, oh, you got to do something in ministry. If you didn't do something, if it wasn't like headed in that direction, you're selfish. Like, what do you want to go to college for? You just want to make a bunch of money so you can be a greedy person, And it's just funny how it's so disconnected from the rest of reality.
Yeah, I think listening to you made me realize. I think I finally haven't answered your question. Um, that like going to church, like you should do these things, and let's say all of them are good things. You should do them because God said so, and if you don't, like, He's gonna be mad at you. Um, I know that's an oversimplification, but it's something like that. And listening to Peterson's fear is more like reality is structured in such a way that if you do these things, your life will be as good as it can. Like you're conforming to the structure of reality, not like there's a guy who's going to be mad at you if you don't follow my version of what this Bible verse says. And I much prefer, that's easier to communicate with people that aren't in the church, which I really love.
Mm-hmm.
And like most of the time, like that's what we're doing, like with the Bible, right? But not completely, but like this is how reality works. This is how you can implement it in your life to make your life better and the people around you lives better. Like that's a much better story than you're going to make Jesus sad if you do this thing. Like, okay.
Yeah, yeah, or just that, it's super important to get all the people that to say a prayer, and then once they do that, they can do whatever they
You
want.
don't,
But it's
yeah,
like,
you no longer care about them. Yeah.
yeah, then it's
Yeah.
on to the next person. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Um. All right. So here, what do you? Okay. You mentioned a bunch of things. We've talked about a bunch of things. We both like and stuff. And I would say, um, they seem like they're separate things. Okay, like, okay, so people would say like, okay, you have your work life, doing the caulking business. You have church, like that's a separate thing. Then you have like, stuff you listen to. Some of it like fantasy books, others things, maybe Peterson, Vervaeke, Peugeot lectures, PBK stuff. Those seem like, and we talk about them as if they're four like separate things, but I think they're very connected. How connected do you think they are?
Absolutely connected. Yeah. I don't even, Yeah, so I really like Ian McGilchrist. I like that frame. And like everything is like it's just like a left brain trick in that frame that like these categories that are all like it's all interwoven together. Um, yes, yeah, pulling them apart makes no sense in my mind.
Hmm. So okay, yeah, because I was thinking about even like how like what you were saying about how when you're working with your hands, when you're working construction, there's like you're interacting with reality, stuff like that. And I almost think in some ways when we read stories or watch movies or things like that, Lord of the Rings or whatever, it's always these things where it's in like a pre technological age. So, fighting is not pushing a button and ordering drone strikes, which just seems like a horrible disconnection from between the person doing it and the reality of what's happening. It's like you're going to have to get your hands dirty. People got to hit each other and stuff. Um, and I think like I don't know. I think that's the aspect of it that where it's so connected to reality that like appeals to people. Like it's almost like, oh man, life would be so much simpler. Like I think that's a part of the appeal that people have it. Like maybe look at it and be like, oh, it looks cool because it's like swords and armor and stuff like that. But it's actually what we're actually really drawn to is the way that it just makes sense. Like if a guy's attacking you, you have to defend yourself. And rarely is like real life that easy, but it kind of is when you work in uh, construction, not in the fighting aspect, but it's like, hey, this thing is going to remain broken until we fix it, or it's going to remain until we build it. It's not going to be there. So, um, so I think that's an unexplored connection because I think you do have like the Bible as like good and evil kind of stuff, and people connect. Like Peterson does the whole like mythology thing, and Pajot, like you can connect it to these other archetypes of myths, order and chaos, all that. That's like the high level stuff. But then it's like when I actually read the Bible, it looks like a whole bunch of people doing stuff that is like what you and I do. It's uh, like, oh, Adam and Eve are naked, God makes them coats, like, um or whatever, like uh the guys, somebody waters their camels, somebody gives a meal to a stranger, and it's like these are such um like, I don't know, I feel like there's a little disconnect just with how much that like basic stuff is, um that I don't know if this is really coming to question. It's just me saying this, and you can
Yeah,
just say you agree or disagree or whatever. But I don't know.
yeah,
But to me, like that is like that. It's that is like there is a connection there with all that stuff. Um,
yeah. I think. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah. Say
So,
something.
so my wife and I are watching this show. It's it's kind of an older show. It's a TV series. It has Ewan McGregor and his buddy, and they ride bikes like in different ways around the world. And they end up like out in the sticks of like Africa or whatever. And at one point, they're watching these people like they're in Africa in the middle of nowhere, like hiding like off the beaten path because there's like bandits or something. And the tour guides or whatever bring out a goat and like start slaughtering, and they're like horrified that like they don't want to eat dinner because they're watching the and they're it's not like they're all vegans or something. Like they all eat meat, but they're horrified and don't want to eat it, and they're gonna like eat their pre-made meals and stuff because like what did you how did you think that you got meat this like this is like how it's so disconnected from reality. And like I think I've been reading this book by DC Schindler that I'm really liking, and he talks about like modernity is like a buffering us from reality with like insurance and all this stuff. Like you're so
Mhm.
removed from reality. And like I think maybe it's just me, but like I think we're sick of that. And I think like I have I think being in construction, I have less of that. Like there's less like before I step onto a job, most jobs, like I've got to sit down to an hour or 2 hour safety meeting about all the ways that I could die today because like it's real and reality is going to happen. And if you're not careful, you're going to die,
Hmm.
which like really takes you out of the the facade of modernity or whatever. Um, I don't know. That's what made me think
Yeah.
of.
Well, that's an interesting one too, because I don't know, because yeah, I have to do quite a bit of that. I work for a pretty big corporation, so we have to make sure we follow all the right like OSHA stuff and all that. And I don't know about you. I mean, I think, have you noticed that like there is a disconnect between the kind of stuff that when it comes down from like a regulatory agency versus like what actually makes sense in real life?
Oh my goodness. It's so, I don't want to be too angry about it because like I've heard the older guys like my boss that started the company, like it used to be bad. Like people used to like line up, wait for someone to fall off the steel and they'd go start working because like there was no OSHA or anything. So on the one hand, I am grateful that we care about life a little bit more and like somewhat it's nuts. It's nuts, especially on the bigger jobs. It's like what like I'm pretty sure you're actually making me more likely to hurt myself in doing this. Like none of it makes any sense. It like I, I sometimes I miss the times when the people at the top had worked their way there rather than
Hmm.
just going to college and going straight to it. Because a lot of the safety stuff just doesn't like it makes if you were to follow it all perfectly, you would either never complete the job or it would cost 10 times as much, which makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That whole thing of like what I think that probably is a big part of the problem. That thing where the person starts at the bottom and they work their way up to the top versus like I don't know. I guess it's because of the way college over, you know, came like the path towards like that separation between like blue collar, white collar, whatever. But yeah, to me that seems like a big part of the issue is that there is not like somebody should that gets to the top. They need to know all the steps along. That's like a Peugeot thing, you know, hierarchies and whatnot. But yeah, so
Yeah.
okay, so what now? All right, here's a question. What do you think, from your knowledge and expertise in the construction industry, and you had training, you know, I guess you'd say for ministry, or, you know, you could, if you wanted to, if somebody wanted to go, or, you know, that's probably the first step for a lot of people that want to, and eventually end up being pastors, something like YWAM or the thing I did or whatever. What do you think the church could learn from like the construction world, or when it works well, not from its bloated, you know, regulatory system, but
Can you flesh the question out a little bit more?
like, do you think that there are, um okay, well, let me say it this way, like what what could your YWAM program have done to prepare you for like the reality of life better?
I don't I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't think they could have. I've taken part in training a few people for our company and there's no substitute for interacting with reality. I'm sorry there just isn't. Which isn't to say that schooling isn't good. It's really good.
Mm,
But if you don't get out there and actually interact with actual reality, it just doesn't help. Like there's no way that abstract learning can prepare you for actually interacting with reality. Like I have no idea how that would even work. And I think both would be the best. Like, but you have to actually get your hands dirty and learn how stuff. Like I don't think I can't imagine a program that could actually do that unless they're like something like I think I only partially understand your program, but like if you're teaching and getting out in the field doing things, showing them what it feels like to, but you're in carpentry, I would assume.
Yeah.
Like what it feels like to actually plane a board or something. Like to understand how to plane a board is one thing. You can understand the mechanics of it all you want. But if you don't know what it feels like to do that and how to get it flat, like there's a million things that you're never going to learn in the classroom. And like the old guys that have been doing it forever, like hacks and stuff that they know, that you're not going to pick up in the classroom. Um, I'm sorry, that kind of ruins your question, doesn't
No, all right. Well, no, I mean that's yeah. Well, I mean you are making the point of why, because what my idea was to really combine those things in a sense,
Mm,
like because I think that they should like inform each other, because well,
yeah.
it's like I mean all those parables that Jesus tells, they're about real stuff, farming, fishing, like baking or whatever, and it's like everybody they was speaking to knew exactly what he was talking about when he described those things. And if he had said something like, presumably, I mean, he didn't say anything that they were like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. He doesn't know the first thing about farming or
Yeah.
whatever. So he was like, he was right in those things. And then he just was like, hey, look, you understand this thing. And that's also what it's like in the spiritual sense. Like, kingdom of God is like that too. But so you can say that between like the construction business is a lot like the kingdom of God. It is not, however, like the church. And maybe like the church is also like the kingdom of God in some ways,
Yeah.
but there's a missing piece there in the like the overlap or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and I
Um
liked it. Like, it, so I think this is true. Like, just going to church, at least in the kind of churches that we go to, like it's almost like, not entirely. This is being unfair, but it's like uh, like a fake pretend like things are better than they are because all the reasons. And being in construction and interacting like being a Christian and interacting with the world in a way, like it's totally different. Like it has to fit to reality much better once you take it out into construction. And like if I didn't rub shoulders with the kind of people that I do and hear their life stories and what it's actually like it Christianity needs to conform to them in a way that works for them. And like it's not pretty. Like reality isn't pretty. It just isn't. It can be,
mhm.
but I like that. Yeah, we've already said that. I like the reality of construction and how it teaches you how to interact with like actually broken and hurting people that have messed everything up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think probably my kind of intuition is that one of the maybe bigger problem is that there are probably people in church who sit there and have a lot of wisdom or have this they know this. Maybe they've
mm,
connected it like you and I are talking about to their work or maybe not. But it seems like there's a problem of oversight where the church is not utilizing those people or whatever. It's like that's what we need. We don't want, it's honestly like the church would be blessed to hear uh, the application or whatever in the lives of many different types of people, because it is a universal thing or whatever, reality, I guess, you could say. So, and anybody that's interacting with reality in some way, and even like with the abstract stuff, it's like, if you fudge the numbers or whatever, it's like it's going to come out eventually. You can't like just you can't fake stuff or whatever. So um but I don't know. It seems like maybe that's some of the problem that church culture got kind of wrapped up in, that like fake it till you make it kind of a thing. I don't know. There's a good aspect of that, but there's also like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. When you go there and it's like, yeah, everybody get excited for being at church, and then it's like just a self-referential thing. Like we're just excited because we're here, and then that helps the church be more excited, or like, well, I don't know. It's just like it's like a concert without actually having like a band that you really like. You're just it's like,
Yeah, that's good.
and I'm not even saying that because like you don't like the music or whatever, but I mean it's like being excited about the like I don't know, like because
Like you should be excited.
church like isn't even a thing. Like what is that? What does that mean if it's not if it's disconnected from like the real lives of all the people that go there? Like church is a bunch of people, and like the most important things in most people's lives tends to be stuff with their family, paying the bills, you know, whatever, if they hate their job or they love their job or something like that. And so it's like that seems like that should be some of the stuff that church should talk about more or
So is that, if I can, I don't know if you're allowed to do this, but is that part of what you're trying to do with your program, is to pull like people out of the church and get them kind of into the world and teach people how to do stuff and mentorship and like that?
yeah, I think so. Like I mean, I think I had a really good talk with Kale the other day about this because he's I asked him if he might be willing to help me with some of the like content for people to listen to. You know, that was like my idea. It's like, well, you're working, you can be learning all this stuff, you know,
Oh,
these good books and things like that. Um, but like, yeah, it is like it's just we everything because of the specialization, which I mean, you're extremely specialized in your particular field, but that's
a
okay.
little.
Um, but like because everything's become so specialized, it's like the connections are so thin. Like you know, people
Between
don't
trades.
between trades and between different aspects of life, and um, you know, it's like if you want to get healthy, you have to have like separate time for going to the gym. You need to have separate time for like cooking and shopping healthy meals. You got to like do everything in these compartmentalized ways. It's like, you know, uh, and and because of that, like then relationships even I guess is like another thing. You know, it's like, oh, I don't have time to go and hang out with friends or whatever. Whereas if you were working with people that you like or whatever, you know, or if you're like friendship should be building while you're doing the other things. And, you know, those other things should all be connected. Like we used to have like these thick connections and now it's all really thin. So my thing is just kind of getting back to that. And I don't really have like a specific thing of like, this is the way that life should be, but it's almost like the more specialized we get and the more disconnected, just the more at risk we are of if anything bad happens, like we're gonna be screwed, you know. So
Yeah, you're not wrong.
yeah, I mean, because and that's even it's not like you not everybody needs to be like a survival prepper or something, but like if the power goes out or something, you know, or like you know like the stuff that happened down there in the Carolinas, like with the hurricanes, you know, and it's like people that had a little bit of know-how were a lot better off than the people that had none, you know. And so it's like even if even you don't have to be an expert at that stuff, but it's like at least if you know how things work like in a couple different separate domains, and I think that's important that you understand how like things work in different ways, then you're going to be able to figure out like how to solve whatever problems are in front of you. But
Yeah. And it seems like like the more different realms you kind of learn at least a little bit about, the more like the next thing is easier to learn.
mhm.
I really like that. That's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, because I mean, you know, I guess a good example of that would be that you know you're learning like philosophy and stuff like that, and that I'm assuming would that have had any appeal to you when you were like right out of high school or something? To no, right. So, what makes it interesting now?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think so for That's a good question. I think I think because for me, like and when I start to get too deep in the philosophy, it starts to get disconnected for me, and I start to not being able to pay attention. So I think for me, it does need to be connected more to reality.
Hmm.
And if I think about it now, in doing so, the small group thing that I used to do, starting point at the last church, it's kind of like going over basic Christianity things, but it's a good portion of it is just kind of like estuary, just opening up for people to ask questions. And people ask kind of all the same questions, like what about the dinosaurs and all the same questions. And I didn't have answers that I was happy with. Like I had the kind of normal Christian answers, but I wasn't happy with the depth of them or how they interfaced with reality. And so I think that really kicked it off of like you actually need to know how to answer questions, and the more you learn and understand, the deeper you see reality and the Bible and things like that, the more you can actually help people out, and then it
Hmm.
actually is useful and interacts with reality. So I think it bugged me that people that were genuinely interested in Christianity asked questions. I didn't have great answers. Like I just had the jargony answers that we talked about earlier. And like that really annoyed me.
Yeah.
Um, and so honestly, I think in some ways that like feeling inept kind of made it worthwhile for me to start listening to hours and hours and hours of intellectual philosophy and stuff like that, because then you actually have something to hand to someone that's like actually hurting and like suffering and whatever. It's
And then I don't know if you maybe I don't know if you can think of an example per se or whatever, but I mean I think there is something to like because I understand, I understand more some of this stuff. I don't talk like a philosopher or whatever, generally speaking, but um, but so knowing those things though, have you found that it does help you help other people? Even you're not just saying you got to go read Plato or whatever, right? Like how does your like now that you've grown, your knowledge and understanding of that stuff has grown, how does that help you then like make the bridge back to the person that needs answers to their questions?
a really good question. I I don't think I'm there yet, or at least I don't feel like I'm there yet. Like I feel like I'm still learning and there's so much I don't know. Um, at the very least, knowing that there's other answers, like good people with other answers to the questions, and that God is far bigger than I ever imagined. Like, I don't know if this is going to make any sense. Um, like at the end of the day, sometimes all you can do is really sit with people.
Hmm.
And like sometimes, even if you do know, like throwing out philosophy at them, um, I mean, that's not helpful when someone's going through hell. It just isn't. Um, but also, like having a deeper understanding of trying to dance around, not getting into things I don't want to talk about on the internet. Um, like having confidence in my answers to things, like what happens after we die, and talking to someone who just lost someone. Like I, do, for some reason, to me, dealing. Let's just talk about that. Like someone loses someone is something that unfortunately me and some of the people I know have too much experience with. Like, oh, they're in heaven and Jesus loves you. Like, I'm not saying that's wrong. It's like annoying and not really helpful. Like almost kind of un like I feel more uncertain. I don't have those pat answers anymore.
Hmm.
Um, but that leads me to end up saying like I don't know. Like I don't know where your loved one is. I really don't. But all of the things that I've read and learned lead me to believe that like whatever heaven is, I don't know. I don't know if it's gold. I hope it isn't because I hate gold aesthetic, but like somewhere you're like, I firmly believe that God exists. I don't understand him at all, at all. He's so far past me. But the more I learn, the more people I listen to, the more I experience, like I'm sure that he, whatever he is, exists, and that you have a ton of value in a way that we don't understand, and like they do exist. In what form? I have no idea. But like you will be with them again. I don't know what then. And maybe this is mindless rambling that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
like
mean,
sitting
yeah.
in the not knowing and just
Mhm.
saying like I have looked into these things and no, I don't have great answers, but like I don't know. That's a stupid answer. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I think, it's, yeah, I think there's something about that. Like, it's interesting because I almost feel like maybe knowing more and learning more about these things, it doesn't necessarily change the actual answer you're going to give to the person. Maybe you do give them what seems like a pat answer. Maybe it seemed like a pat answer when you heard it because you were hearing it from somebody who was just saying it
Blowing off.
as,
Yeah.
you know, this is the right thing to say in this circumstance, versus hearing it from somebody who really believes it and understands it. And I think, because that's like you say, like, yeah, I don't know all those things, but I'd say, like, I know God is good, and I trust in Him that He's taking care of this situation, and I know that the way He's doing it is going to be better than whatever I could imagine. And it's even says that in Scripture, and so, like, that's a pretty. I mean, in some sense, it's an invitation for us to dream and imagine big, and then realize that whatever the best case scenario, God's got something that's even better than that, or whatever. But yeah, it is. But I mean, I think that's even that is the problem with that disconnection, is that when we just have answers that are like formulaic, you know, if somebody says A, you answer with B. There is a difference between that and then somebody who's really worked it out and who's figured it out and knows, even if that knowing includes doubt, because that is very honest.
And I
Probably,
think
yeah.
people can read that. Like if you're just like it's gonna be fine because God's good. Like you can see, like you can say that and like literally be engaging, honestly be engaging with the person. You can say that and just be like, yeah, it'll be fine. Go away. Like those are very different things. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a great answer for that one.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there is a great. I mean, I think no. I think. I mean, I just it is interesting, just to think about that thing of, like, because I'm with you in the same way. It's like when I get too far into the abstractions and I can't, and it's just the abstractions and it's not connected, like it loses, I lose interest or whatever. Like it needs to be, you need to have that connection, like all throughout, all the different like layers of understanding it, because if not, it's like what is the point of it or whatever. And um but that is a crucial thing then, to let doubt like be a part of that or whatever, because you're not, if there's no room for questioning, if there's no room for making a mistake or being wrong, then uh you're you're never going to get there, and so you're just going to always be stuck at level one, getting the answers from the guy on top, and you just, you know your faith's not even in God. Your faith is it's almost as if they're saying, don't put your faith in me, instead of, you know don't doubt what I say about God. um
Yeah.
yeah. And I think, back to like the construction thing, I think there's a lot of really good lessons in there, because uh are there a lot of mistakes you can make in your job that are completely irreversible and unfixable?
Um, not usually. It can be sometimes, yes. It depends on basically how porous the substrate is. Like some things caulking's not going to come off
Yeah.
of.
Okay.
But most of the time, like most of the time, I can fix it.
Yeah. Well, and even if you can't fix it, it doesn't mean it's unfixable. There's so it just might mean somebody else has got to get involved or whatever. But
I mean, in some sense, that's kind of fixing the mistakes is basically what I do. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you know how construction works. Like it goes through the process, like people grading it and then laying the foundation, putting on, and like everybody has variance. And
Yeah.
at the end of that whole process, everybody uses up their variance plus a little, and everything's out of whack. And then I kind of come in at the end and make it all okay.
hmm Well, I mean that's how much is like I don't know. Maybe that's something that we need to develop, put more in churches, like our theology of variance, because I feel like that's almost a big problem. Is that the way people talk about like, you know, I don't know, I don't know. I get I this is something that took a lot of my thought energy or whatever. It's just this thing of don't even get involved in these various like circumstances because you might sin or whatever. And I think that becomes so constricting because it's almost like where's your path forward in life? And it's that thing of yeah, the world's not perfect. Like it's it's all that fine tuning stuff, which is true, but then it's not like it's still a little bit off, like because you can tell that by how life is. It could be fine tuned a little bit more. But to me, it's like okay, well, God essentially, it's like He made the world, and then He factored in the fact that things could go a little bit out of whack, or a lot out of whack from our perspective. But I think from His, it is a small variance. Um, but it's like the difference is you have a building that's imperfect or you have no building, right? Because yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And like all of life is in that imperfect, like all of it. Yeah. Yeah. One of the best, the woman caught in adultery thing, like
hmm
all of life is in the like, oh, we've messed up a little bit. How are we going to fix this? Where do we go from here?
yeah, yeah, man. I wish, and that's almost like because I don't know. Whenever I think since I've been in this space and thinking about the biblical stories and stuff more, um, well, uh, the way I keep reading it now is that there's all I always hear you always hear them as these moralistic things like don't whatever like Samson made a mistake because he got involved with that Philistine woman or whatever, and it's like avoid those women or something or just whatever it is, whatever any character David did the same thing, and it's always like oh look at the one bad thing that they did, and like that the point of the story is to avoid making their same mistake. But then when you actually read it, it's like God's the fun part for God. I don't want to say the fun part, but it's like how bad can they mess up, and I can still do what I want with those people, and that's what he ends up doing. But then the difference being that they did those little like acts of faith or whatever. It's like the whole thing with like I had this big argument with when I just did the book of Genesis with the guys at my church, little men's Bible study we do. And like the part with Abraham and Hagar, and they're like trying to say like he should have known that was the wrong thing to do. I'm like, okay, read everything before that. Where was he supposed to figure out that was the wrong thing to do? His wife told him to do it. Like, I mean, it's like obviously there was problems with that situation, but this is like I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. And like we treat the people in the Bible like that, and then it's like we can't learn anything about them. Like we treat them as if they all had the whole thing already printed, and especially it's like in those early stories, it's like they didn't know. Like what did they they didn't really know what was going to happen when they ate that fruit or whatever. It's like, I don't know. So it's just giving those people a little bit more grace in my reading and stuff. It helps me to look at life differently. And I don't know. I think maybe there's just something about God's more interested in us doing something, even if we do it wrong and make mistakes. Then I don't think He wants us to be living in constant fear of making mistakes. I think that is a bad that produces bad outcomes. So
This is one of my favorite things about the Bible. It's like everybody's in the fog of war. I mean, no one knows what we're doing, especially them. Like, I've never thought about it that way. Of like they're writing the book, they don't have necessarily the guides. I mean, I'm sure they had some traditions and stuff, but like it feels like I was given a God who like is waiting to yell at you about doing things wrong. But like it feels like in reading the Bible, like his favorite thing is to meet like, okay, you've gotten to a point where things got wrong and like you've realized you've messed everything up. It feels like, I think like you're saying in some ways, like that's God's favorite part. Like, okay, that was bad, let's maybe not
mm,
do that again. Like, how are we going to fix it? Like, it feels like it's the relationship and like, how are we going to work through this together, and let's move on from here, and between the two of us move towards like a relationship and the good and all that. Like, I love that story
mhm,
of like, let's relationally get better. Like, yes, where you're at's bad. Like, let's not stay here. Like, it's not like everything's fine. Like, it isn't fine. Like, obviously it's not fine. Everything's messed up.
mhm,
But let's together walk towards
yeah.
good.
I mean, well, I was even thinking. I'm sure it's the same for you because it's the case for me. But like, what is a more valuable teaching experience when you're learning like construction trades? Doing it the right way or like doing it the wrong way?
Yeah. So um yeah, there's like a million doing it the wrong ways. Like, I could think of one of the, well, it's not the worst ones, but like as a for instance, I was fairly new in construction and my boss told me like, go in this building, run around real quick and count up the joints that need caulk. And so I'm like, I'm young, ready to go, run into the job, counting up joints, and like poke my head in a room, step into the room, right into wet concrete, and like totally mess up this guy's floor that he's just poured. Um, I never did that again. I know exactly what green concrete looks like, and I never stepped in green concrete ever again. That's a good lesson. Like, it sticks
Yep.
with you because now I feel like an idiot.
Right.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I had heard like, I don't know. I heard Jordan Hall saying this on somebody's talk sometime recently. Um, but when he said it, I was like, yeah, that's true. It was like he was saying that when you um if you learn how to spell a word wrong and then you learn like the right way to spell it, you actually are always like remembering. You remember it the wrong way and then you remember how you're supposed to fix it. Like,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
So like the memory is pinned to like the mistake, and then you
yeah,
can sort through it.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And when I think that's definitely like true with like, building things and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, those mistakes are, because otherwise it's almost like, I don't know. It's like if you never made a single mistake or whatever, like what are you going to do like in a 20-year career, then when suddenly that first mistake comes along, it's going to be devastating or whatever, or um
And
or
that's a great point.
yeah. And like the same thing with like marriage and other relationships too. It's like, not ever having a fight is not a good place to be in, because then like your first fight's going to wreck you. So I don't know, like get but you get in that rhythm of, this is not the end of the world. There's a way past this, and you do kind of remember those things. Yeah, I remember when I learned that lesson, and those things stick with you.
Yep. And I think you're totally right. Like, the one of the big thing for me, like and my personality, I'm more agreeable. So like for me, stepping in the green concrete, like now that's going to ruin the rest of my day because I feel terrible. Like, I messed up,
Mhm,
can't do it
mhm,
right. And if like construction has been great for teaching me, like, no, 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 like, you did mess up. That's bad. Don't do that again. but like you got to get back up and keep going, and you're gonna make more mistakes. But like you brought up with like your wife, like yeah, have a fight, learn how to fight well, but like you're gonna do it again, and don't like never quit, don't quit, and you keep your head in the game, like all that stuff. Construction teaches you, like kind of brutally, but it was good for me. Like I needed it.
Yeah, yeah. I think okay. Whoa, all right. Now I'll bring this one into it. So this is actually something I really liked about the Wheel of Time compared to Tolkien or whatever. Like I don't know. It's like, well, what I liked about it is that it showed like everybody having like parents and like families and stuff. All the like main characters, and it's like, oh, this is like where they come from, and it's like, I don't know, you're kind of miss that in the. It's actually really weird. Like I was thinking about it the other day, and it's like there's no fathers in the Lord of the Rings except for Denethor, and he's a bad, weird father. Like in the movie, they just always have that thing with him biting that tomato, that scene or whatever.
Oh
But
my gosh, that's so bad. That's the worst. That
yeah,
was such a good scene. Like I don't know, it terrible. Yeah.
yeah. But I don't know. But like that. So because and that's like has this whole thing. It's like, because I was trying to think about like the hobbits are the good guys or whatever, and it's like, oh, they're just magical and everything works out for the hobbits, and it's great to be a hobbit and to live in the Shire, but it's like, why is it great? And that's like kind of the thing. That's like, and I know it's part of his fantasy. It's like the England of long ago that he's longing for. But I actually thought it was really uh, more compelling in Jordan's book how he showed the people and in their environment, and uh, there was mistakes, and there was um, but there was like there's a reason why they got there. They showed like, oh well, this is the culture that they come from, and it prioritizes those things. And um so I guess on the flip side of that, there is the way that you can like learn from mistakes, but there's also like a hope that you can maybe minimize them or whatever, or maybe like, I don't know. I think that's probably a big uh, thing of maybe a lesson from parenting, but something the church needs to figure out. It's like, the point of don't protect your kids from skin knees, because like skin knees is way better than getting hit by a truck or whatever, or something like so it's like you gotta like you I don't know, maybe that's the thing church could figure out, or because I think maybe you do that in the construction trades. You start off, you're not in charge of the whole job, right? You're only in charge of little things, and so then when you make mistakes, you only make little mistakes. um I don't know how to I don't know if there's a question there, but or if it's just more pondering. But well, I don't know. Maybe you could say in that sense of like, if you're training somebody or whatever, like um, what do you think is the good approach to allow that freedom to make mistakes without it being too catastrophic, or not babying people too much? Like I don't know if you can if I don't know if you can explain it, or you know if it's just something you have to figure out. 'Cause that's even I've had to figure that out. Like, you make mistakes the first time you're training somebody or whatever. Like, that's another new thing you're kind of having to figure out. But um, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
some like principles or whatever that are beneficial from your experience in that.
I'll be honest, I'm not great at training people. Um, I think what I would tend to do is like, okay, I I want you to be here. I want you to work on this. Like, there's this one or two things that you can do that's going to be real bad. Like, please don't do those things. but everything I like, I can fix whatever you do wrong. Like you kind of have some idea, like why don't you get going? And like I'll be back in a few minutes. But you're right, there is like a like I can't stand over you all day long, and that's not good either. Like you need to figure it out for yourself. Um, and like I can come back and save you for the most part. And I don't know if this is making any sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes
I'm
sense.
not.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think just I don't know. It's a good question.
yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I think that's the thing I want to find the balance. Well, because this was my experience. I don't know if you had it too much in the churches you went to. Well, okay, this was big one in the Bible college that I went to for a few years. Like they had, you know about Teen Challenge. You ever heard of Teen Challenge?
Mhm.
It's like a drug recovery program or
Oh,
whatever,
okay.
and it's I think it's pretty affiliated with Assemblies of God churches or whatever. But anyway, so this college I went to was, affiliated in the same way. And they would have a bunch of students that would come from Teen Challenge. And it was like the Teen Challenge guys were all like the celebrities or whatever. Cause they all had this like dramatic story of like they fell
Oh
into
yeah.
drug addiction and
Oh
then
yeah.
they got their life together. And it was like it was almost, and it's funny because I even remember when I was like a kid, like there were several people in my parents' church. My parents had a little bit of that, like my dad had a little bit of that kind of a story, and it was almost like I thought like the pattern is like, first you like mess up and do horrible stuff, and then you get saved, and then like you live for God or whatever. But that's obviously not like the only path, or maybe not even the ideal path. So um
I
I don't know.
remember I remember seeing those people and like almost like wishing that
Yeah.
wishing that I had messed something up catastrophically so I could be like the hero that overcame like whatever. Like I uh, maybe that's it. I remember that very much. Yeah. I haven't thought about that in years.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like how do you make that good that the testimony of like I grew up in a Christian home, like that should be the good testimony or whatever. That should be the testimony
It's
that
boring.
everybody's envious of. Well, boring is good though, like well, that's
Yeah.
what you find out later on. I guess
Yeah.
when you're like a teenager, it doesn't seem that way, but
Yeah, it's like in the movies, like no one shows the old married couple. Like that love story is not super interesting. It's like the new passionate, like all about sex and interesting things and yeah, like the but it's also nice to not have super deep wounds. I mean, we all collect them, but there is a like you do get to look cool for having overcome something, and you should. Like that's it's good to overcome things, but you also
mhm,
have to carry that stuff. Like, yeah.
yeah. Well, maybe then this would be a good way to ask it is because I think um, there should be value in that that person who has that dramatic story or whatever, or, goes through that real horrible trial. They learn something powerful, but like, how do we learn from their story in a way that, um, so that we don't have to do the same thing? I guess like I don't know. Can you? I don't know if you've. I think personally that this is part of the good thing of even figuring out how the things in your life, like the stories that you like and the work that you do, and the more spiritual things, how they all connect. It helps you figure out how to make use of somebody else's wisdom, maybe in some ways. um like, because then you can you can learn the same lesson from your spiritual skin knees that somebody else did from their spiritual drug overdose or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I mean, that's what to some degree that's what the Bible is, and that's what like getting into the trades and learning from a guy that's been doing it for 30 years. Like you get to skip over a few skin knees, and as much as you do remember skinning your actual knee, like not tying off and falling out of a lift or doing something stupid where you die. Like that's a lesson I would like to not learn firsthand.
Hmm.
Like the like any skin knee that you can avoid from wisdom of either people that you know or the Bible or even fake stories like um Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of truth in there, and
Yeah,
it's kind of a lot of why I like Peugeot, like starting to see the world in patterns that play themselves out. Like that's a really useful heuristic, I think.
cool, cool. All right. Well, what's what's your plans going forward? Anything you got going on? Thinking about since you've gone to the estuary conference and all that. Like, how are you? I don't know. Planning to make use of all this knowledge you're acquiring and stuff, or any practical ways you can think of?
That's a good question. I need to sign up for the I forget what it's called, the estuary hub
Else,
thing where you can
ElseNet or yeah, estuary.hub. I think that gets you. That's the website and it gets you there. But yeah.
I definitely need to do that. I've been tremendously busy actually. I got really busy as soon as I got back from the retreat. But I would like to do that and sign up for the leadership portion. I'm trying to figure out how if I can complicate, but I'd like to pull that into the church that I'm
Hmm.
in some way. Um, I'm also seriously considering going to Chicago. Should be really cool. Um, yeah, I think off the top of my head, that's all I can think of.
Well,
I'm
that's
sorry. I
cool.
feel like
So
all my answers are terrible.
no, no. I mean, hey, no way. It's great. So that's something. So anybody potentially people can meet you in Chicago. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that'd
that'd be
that's
fun.
something to know. All
And
right.
I'm really just enjoying all the diversity and stuff that I shouldn't have used that word. The different viewpoints and
No,
things.
use it because diversity is a good word. Don't let it
Okay.
be. It's yeah, real.
In the way that grown-ups use it,
Yeah.
like diversity of opinion and things like that. Like I love that. I think I'm very new to the corner and don't fully understand it yet, but I think it's really interesting. And I really like that above all, you guys are like holding to relationship in spite of differences. And I think we need a lot more of that. And I'd like to figure out how can I pull that because I'm not super duper online kind of person. How can I pull that spirit into my life currently? That's what I
Mhm.
don't have an answer for that yet, but that is what I'm working towards. I want to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, and I would say maybe like for it's funny because you hear a lot of the people that are online a lot, and a lot of the people making the video talking about how like people are too much online, but in some sense, maybe it's the job of us people who have a little bit more like embodied real life stuff going on. Like we need to go into the internet space as like a little bit of a I don't know if I say missions field, but we need to have a little bit more engagement to show. I mean, I think this part of the reason why I like talking to people that do similar stuff and asking these questions is because I mean, I think if people started like learning how to fix stuff and do things like that, like a lot of their meaning crisis kind of problems would be lessened at least, if not, totally go away. But um, it just really helps to put things in perspective, like um or I guess you could say, if you never really had a severe meaning crisis, I'm guessing the people that were going nuts over Donald Trump were not all people that are doing the same thing you do on a day-to-day basis, or
Mostly no.
mostly no. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's yeah, stop reading the news a little bit and go like pound some nails or caulk some joints and seams and things, right?
Yeah, I love that. I've never really thought about it like that, but even something as silly as like learning how to like I'm looking at an outlet, replace an outlet or something. Like the more capacity that you have to actually do things, the more you feel like not overwhelmed by reality. Like, yeah, I can handle, like, you're just increasing your capacity to do things. And that, I think you're right, that does help you, especially like it brings in the meaning if you're doing it with someone, like learning from someone. So now you have a community and you have some capacity to deal with stuff. Like, I don't know that I fully understand your project, but that's what you're trying to do. I really like it. I think it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the thing was like, I loved, I loved the experience that I had, like working at a church and doing all this churchy stuff. And, we had the quiet times every day. And like, that was all great. But then it was like, okay, now I got to figure out how to be a grown up still. like, and, and working, and the way that I kind of fell into working with my hands full time, it really was like my life's never been better since I, started focusing on that. And like for me, it was, first I was working at a church full time and then doing some of that stuff supplementally. It was like a big part of my work week. But then for me, the better balance was to just be working and then, you know, working construction primarily and then supplementing with the church stuff, but it could be different for other people as well. And it's nice to be able to like fix stuff around your own house and things like that. So
Yeah. And it's like not only like I was thinking I years ago I went to church and I forget what it was. Something about my plumbing was like messed up. Um, I think my sink wasn't draining or something, so I couldn't wash the dishes. And went to church having not fixed it because I'm not great with plumbing. And at church, like someone found out and literally like left church, came home with me, showed me how to fix the plumbing. And now like my plumbing's fixed. I didn't have to call a plumber. I didn't have to pay for a plumber. I built a relationship with a person and picked up more skills. Like that was a big deal. And that to me, like messages are great and singing songs are great. Like I really like them both, but that was way more meaningful to me.
mm, yeah, and that's yeah, I think, and having those people in your church is so valuable. And that's probably part of the thing is that maybe because they weren't like the noisiest complainers or they're not, I don't know, but like the reach has shifted away from those people. And I think we need to bring that back because it's um like you definitely need those people in your church. And then there's a lot more utility to having a church. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, like to say like you should go to church so that you meet people that can, meet plumbers that are trustworthy or whatever. Like that's not a bad reason to go or whatever. I mean, or that because that's the thing. It's like that's the thing that people are missing is like good real community. And that's all part of like real community is stuff like that, like having people that can help you with projects and help you fix stuff. And so I don't know, maybe it's just because it's like it's not sacred, so people don't want to like think about it in practical terms. But it's like no, like this would be a really good thing for church to focus on a little bit more, I think. So
Yeah, I totally disagree that him coming over and helping me learn how to fix my sink, like maybe on the surface that doesn't seem sacred, but I'm sorry. To me, that was a sacred moment. That was a big deal. And
yeah.
I think that's like, yeah, I agree with you. We could use a lot more of that. If that's what you're doing, like I'm gonna keep following you. Like that's really cool. I like that a
Thank
lot.
you, thank you. Well, yeah, that's kind of the goal, and it's a work in progress, and I'm trying to think. I want to make stuff like I don't want it to be all about me. I really want it to be about people just taking these ideas and using it their own way and stuff like that. So any given local church should have some resources to do a little bit of that, and it's a good way to get like younger people involved and stuff. Like, 'cause that's even something I found out. We did the youth group stuff and all the like games and things like that. And like the most impact I had, like I remember in some kids, was like that wasn't very important. But then when I took them to help me like work on some projects around the church, that was like the most meaningful day. I had the best connection with them, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're doing real life stuff with other people as ministry and not just like the things that we think of as being ministry. So
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that.
All right. Well, this has been a really good conversation. Thank you for coming out of the lurk, and I'll yeah, put this out there. I'm sure people will like it, and maybe some of them will get to meet you in Chicago potentially. So that's something to look forward to. So
Cool. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the invite.
yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
It's
right.
fun.